Hi all, welcome to Tax Guru YouTube channel. My name is CA Ronar Pingri, practicing chartered accountant based in Mumbai, also partner in Motilal and Associates LLP, member firm of Mars Network. Welcome to video series GST Relearn Part 4. Yes, today we are going to discuss on topic exemptions from GST. Earlier in part 1, part 2, and part 3, we covered important definitions under GST and supply under GST, charge of GST, and in part 3, in last week, we had covered place of supply under GST. And today in part 4, we are going to discuss exemptions under GST in very simple and basic language, understandable to every one of you. And in this topic, we will cover, means we will touch upon important exemptions quickly. Okay, so you will be helped in revise those important exemptions very quickly, and also those who are accountant, they can also understand the basic whatever exemptions covered, and they can see whether they are those exemptions applicable to their business. They are accounting for those particular business, whatever. So let's move on to it, and let me allow to share my screen. Okay, exemptions from GST section 11 of CGST Act 2017. Let's see what we are going to learn today. We are covering section 11 of the CGST Act 2017 under section 11, power to grant exemption from tax. Then we will move on to subsection 1, subsection 2, subsection 3 of section 11. Under that, we will going to cover general exemption, special order for exceptional cases, power to issue explanation, and then we are going to cover absolute versus conditional exemption, goods exempted under GST, services exempted under GST, then exemptions by threshold, and then other exempted activities. And at the end of the session, we will see conclusions that can be drawn from today's learning. So let's dive into it. Exemptions are provisions under the GST law that relieve specified supplies from the levy of GST either partially or completely. What exemption does is that it relieves specified supplies from the levy of GST either partially, means that is with conditions, or completely. Understanding this is crucial for ensuring correct tax application and avoiding non-compliance. Okay, let's move on to overview of section 11, that is power to grant exemption from tax. Section 11 empowers the central government to grant GST exemptions. Okay, who will grant exemption or who is empowered? Central government is empowered under section 11 of the CGST Act to grant GST exemptions. Such exemptions can be general by notification, that is applicable to all similar cases, or specific, that is by special order applicable to exceptional or individual cases. This is done on the recommendations of the GST Council. Okay, You may see in the newspaper or in news that there will be a GST Council meetings held every month or after 2 months gap. So in that GST Council meeting, these decisions are taken. Okay. So what is the overview of section 11 is the power to grant exemption is with central government under section 11 of the CGST Act, and such exemptions can be general by notification or specific by special order. Means general will be applicable to all similar cases and specific will be applicable to in exceptional cases or to individual cases. Next. Let's see structure of section 11. That is section 11, subsection 1, subsection 2, and subsection 3. We are going to now learning. Subsection 1 talks about general exemption. Okay, subsection 1 of section 11 talks about general exemption. Government may exempt goods or services either absolutely, that is mandatory, or conditionally subject to specific conditions. Means once that those conditions mentioned therein will fulfilled, then you will be eligible to take the or avail the exemption. Applicable from the date specified in the notification. Government may exempt goods or services either absolutely or conditionally. Okay. What subsection 2 talks about? Let's see. Subsection 2 of subsection 11 talks about special order for exceptional cases. Allows exemption in exceptional circumstances done per case, that is individual, not through a general notification, must state a reason justifying such special treatment. Means they need to be state reasons to justify their order, their treatment. Subsection 3 talks about power to issue explanation. Okay. Government can issue clarificatory explanation within 1 year of the notification or special order. These explanations are retrospective and deemed part of the original order. What subsection 3 subsection 3 of section 11 talks about is power to issue explanation. Government can issue clarificatory explanation if once the section or provision taken into place, if they feel that one need to clarify through explanation so that litigation in future can be avoided, then government can issue and come with the explanations to clarify their view on that particular provision or whatever the issue. So, but that must be done within 1 year of the notification or special order. Okay, after 1 year, they cannot issue those explanations. So government need to issue explanations within 1 year of the notification or special order. These explanations are retrospective and deemed part of the original order. These explanations, once issued, are retrospective and deemed part of the original order. They are not prospective in nature. These explanations are retrospective and deemed part of the original order. They will effect from the date of the original order. Let's move on to key concepts of exemptions. Under that, we are now going to learn absolute versus conditional exemption. Let's see absolute exemption. Absolute exemption, no discretion to collect GST. Okay, there will be no discretion to collect GST. Mandatory in nature, supplier must not collect tax, no ITC allowed. Okay, this is what absolute exemption is. No discretion to collect GST. Mandatory in nature means one has to take this exemption. Means there is no discretionary with supplier. They need to follow this. They need to avail this exemption. Okay, therefore, supplier must not collect tax, mandatory in nature, and no ITC allowed. Now move on to conditional exemption. Whereas conditional exemption is allowed only if conditions are made. Is whatever conditions mentioned under that particular head, then only one can take that exemption. Supplier has to prove fulfillment of the conditions. Supplier has to keep those records for fulfilling the conditions. If conditions not fulfilled, GST must be paid. Means any conditions, any one of the conditions, if those are four conditions or five conditions mentioned and that need to be fulfilled, all those five conditions, then if one of the conditions not fulfilled, then one cannot take that exemption. So in that case, GST must be paid. ITC eligibility depends upon conditional terms. Means that ITC eligibility will depend upon whatever the conditions mentioned under that particular provision. Okay. So absolute exemption and conditional exemptions differences are that absolute will be there will be no discretion, mandatory, and no ITC, and supplier must not collect tax. Whereas conditional exemptions allowed only if conditions are met. Supplier has to prove fulfillment of conditions. If condition not fulfilled, GST must be paid. And ITC eligibility depends on the conditional terms. Let's see, nature and scope of exemptions can apply to specific goods or services. Certain transactions cannot be issued solely for a class of persons. Exemption is item or services specific. Exemption notifications are dynamic and may be amended from time to time. These exemption notifications are not static in nature. They are dynamic and may be amended from time to time. Means if one exemption is issued or notified by notification now, it can be changed or amended or completely struck off after some time or after some year if thought so. So it the exemptions nature, notification natures will be dynamic in nature. It can be amended. Let's see explanation to section 11. What explanation is of section 11? Where exemption is absolute, supplier cannot charge GST. If GST is still charged, ITC becomes admissible, but the supplier violates GST law. No revenue neutrality argument is allowed. Okay, understand the concept. When exemption is absolute, supplier cannot charge GST. Mandatory, it is not, supplier cannot collect it. But even though if they collect, then ITC becomes eligible, but the supplier violates GST law and they face maybe the circumstances of anything for violation of the GST law. No revenue neutrality argument is allowed. Here completely it is explained. Exemption is considered mandatory even if overlooked. Exemption is considered mandatory even if overlooked. Let's see procedural aspects of exemptions. Notification mechanics must be issued in public interest. Means any notification must be issued in public interest. Effective date will be as mentioned in the notification. If not mentioned, date of issuance is deemed effective date. Very important. If not mentioned, date if not mentioned, then date of issuance is deemed full effective date. Available on official government websites and published in official gazette. Means this notification, whatever notification issued should be displayed on government websites and also published through official gazette. Special order issued in urgent or unique situations like national security, disaster relief, or defense. Example, exemption of imported goods for defense in emergency. Means by special order, government can issued in urgent means this special order issued in urgent or unique situations like national security, disaster relief, or defense. And for example, we have seen that exemption of imported goods for defense in emergency. In that case, government can issue special order to exempt certain type of goods or even those services. Let's see few of the legal interpretations and litigations. Absolute exemptions treated as binding on suppliers means these are few of the legal interpretations and litigations I have covered that is under absolute exemption is that treated as binding on suppliers, tax paid even by mistake can entitle the recipient to ITC. Means ITC can be taken, but what happened is that supplier will be violating the GST law by charging or by collecting that GST. Supplier cannot collect tax over and above the exempt rate. Supplier cannot collect tax over and above the exempt rate. Let's see conditional exemptions. Litigations point of view where we are going to learning the litigated legal interpretations and litigations. Now, conditional exemptions are typically seen as optional, but court also argue they become mandatory once obtained. If violated, exemption is lost. If violated, exemption is lost and full tax must be paid. Means any one of the conditions mentioned therein, if not fulfilled, then if you have taken exemption, that will be withdrawn, and then you have to pay the tax in full. That the legal interpretations typically seen as optional, but court also argue that they become mandatory once opted. Once you opted for conditional exemptions, you must avail that exemption. And if violated, exemption is lost and full tax must be paid. Please keep in this mind. Industry practices. Some suppliers voluntarily pay GST to maintain input tax chain and avoid reversal. However, such practices must be carefully documented and may be subject to scrutiny. Means what practically done in industries, the some suppliers voluntarily pay GST to maintain input tax change and avoid reversal. But in that case, such practices must be carefully documented and may be subject to scrutiny. Now, very important part of the today's session. Important exemptions under GST. We will quickly touch upon the exemptions covered under GST. First, we will going to see goods exempted from GST. Let's see essential commodities. Unbranded fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, curd, buttermilk, paneer, unprocessed and unbranded. Remember, unprocessed and unbranded. If once it is processed, branded, then it will not cover under the exemption. This is very important. Means milk, curd, buttermilk, paneer, unprocessed and unbranded required. If it is processed, means anything processed and then served, then it will not cover under the exemption notification. Then unbranded cereals and pulses, example rice, wheat, dal. Once it is processed, it will be out of the exemption. Salt is also covered, jaggery, books and educational material. Printed books, including school textbooks, covered under exemption. Newspapers and journals registered with RNI. Health and life-saving products covered. Human blood and its components. Contraceptives, vaccines under the Universal Immunization Program, organ transplant materials, human organs. We are just touching upon the headings, means what covered, and that is also important exemptions by under the goods. So we are not going or touching upon the in going into the deeply. We are just touching upon the heads. Okay, if you want, you can go deep and study these aspects. Okay, so other notable goods are khadi fabrics sold by khadi institutions, mats and globes, sanitary napkins, raw silk, and handloom fabrics. So what are we have covered? Important exemption under GST. Goods exempted from GST under essential commodities, unbranded fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, curd, buttermilk, paneer, unbranded cereals and pulses, salt, jaggery, under books and educational material, printed books, including schools textbooks, newspapers and journals registered with RNI, health under health and life-saving products, human blood and its components, contraceptives, vaccines under the universal immunization programs, organ transplant materials, that is human organs, and other notable goods, khadi fabrics sold by khadi institutions, mats and globes, sanitary napkins, raw silk, and handloom fabrics. Now we are moving to services exempted from GST under head government and local authority services. Okay, services by government or local authority to another government body. Services by government or local authority to another government body exempt. Pure services not involving goods provided to government for panchayat or municipal functions is also covered under exemption. Pure services not involving goods provided to whom government for panchayat or municipal functions also exempt. Grant of viral rights or cremation services also exempt. Let's see next head, educational services. What services are covered under this? Services by educational institutions to students, faculty, or staff, such as transportation, catering, security, or cleaning services, are exempt. Also, midday meal scheme services provided by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, not by any other than NGOs. Midday meal scheme services provided by NGOs will be exempt. And services by an educational institutions to students, faculty, staff, such as transportation, category, and security or cleaning services. Next, healthcare services, clinical establishment services, medical treatment and diagnosis, and services by veterinary clinics. Under healthcare services, what services are exempt? Clinical establishment services, medical treatment and diagnosis, services by veterinary clinics. Next, charitable and religious services. Services by charitable trust registered under Section 12AA or 12AB of the Income Tax Act for advancement of religion or spirituality, education, or medical relief to poor are exempt. Also, renting of precincts of a religious place for general public for conduct of rituals if rent less than equal to 1,000 per day. What services exempt under charitable and religious services? Services by charitable trust registered under Section 12AA or 12AB of the Income Tax Act for advancement of religion or spirituality, education or medical relief to the poor, and renting of precincts of a religious place for general public for conduct of rituals, and that is 2 if rent less than equal to rupees 1000 per day. Now moving to next, transport service. What services covered under transport service for exemption point of view? Passenger transport by air, that is economic class, metro, monorail, public buses, auto rickshaws. Passenger transport by air, economic class, no business class covered up. That will be taxable. GST will be levied on that. So passenger transport by air, economic class, metro, monorail, public buses, auto rickshaws, goods transport service, goods transport by individual truck owners, if not GTA, railways for agriculture produce, goods transport by individual truck owners, railways for agricultural produce. Next service, banking and insurance. Okay. In that, interest on savings or fixed deposit, no GST levied. Loans and advances means under banking and use, if any other charges levied, they had to charge. That is like bank charges. If a bank charged us, GST levied on that. But on interest on savings or fixed deposits, loans and advances are out of the GST. Services by RBI completely exempt. Life insurance service under government schemes, that is PM Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, PM Fasal Bima Yojana. Other than that, GST is tax chargeable. Agriculture and farm. Cultivation, harvesting, threshing, supply of farm labor also exempt and covered under agriculture. Supply of farm labor means any person supply farm labor, that service would be covered under this and will be exempt. Warehousing and storage of agriculture produce. Warehousing and storage of agriculture produce is also exempt, and agricultural extension services. Export related and foreign diplomatic exemptions. Services to seize if for authorized operations. What services to seize if that say on a seize would providing that authorized operation means any businessman under the seize providing the authorized operations, then only that will be exempt. Services to seize are also exempt if for authorized operations. Supply to foreign diplomatic missions and UN organizations. If your services are to foreign diplomatic missions and United Nations organizations, then that also exempt. Now we are moving to third part under exemptions by threshold. Means we have covered exemptions by goods, exemptions for services, and now exemptions by threshold. Under that, turnover based exemption. Person whose aggregate turnover is less than equal to 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs for any or hilly states, not liable to GST registration. Most important exemption, that is threshold, means turnover based exemption. Until that turnover reach the exemption, will be not required to register under GST Act. So person whose aggregate turnover is less than equal to 20 lakhs or rupees 10 lakhs for any or hilly states, not liable to GST registration. Optional composition scheme is available up to rupees 1.5 crore turnover. Means in that you can, once composition scheme is turnover up to 1.5 crore, you can opt for a composition scheme and pay directly fixed rate of GST under that without any ITC and all that. Okay. Optional composition scheme is available up to rupees 1.5 crore turnover. That is turnover based exemption. Now, fourth part, other exempted activities. Let's see. Non-GST or non-supplies. In this, we are covering non-GST and non-supplies. Salaries and employer-employee relationship completely out of the GST. They are treated as a non-GST. Court, tribunal functions, they are also non-GST. Sale of land or completed buildings, that is sale of immovable properties, sale of land or completed buildings. Interest on loans and deposits. Interest on loans and deposits also non-GST. Means there are four types of non-GST or non-supplies. We can say salaries and employer-employee relationship, court or tribunal functions, sale of land or completed buildings, interest on loans and deposits. Let's see impacts on GSTR filings or where we can report this. Exempt supplies, exempt supplies need to be reported in GSTR 9.5D and GSTR 9C.7B, includes value, tax rate, and turnover for nil, exempt, or non-GST supplies. Okay. And related provisions under the other acts is section 6. Means under CGST Act, we are studying, or relevant section is section 11. But under IGST Act, section 6 is for exemption from IGST, section 8 under UTGST Act, and then section 17 subsection 2 of CGST speaks about reversal of ITC if dealing in exempt plus taxable goods. And Rule 45 governs job work for exempted goods. These are the other related provisions we can also study. Means you can also study these sections for your clarification. And now we are moving to conclusions that can be drawn from GST exemptions. Okay, the first conclusion: not all supplies attract GST. Certain goods and services are wholly or partially exempt to reduce the tax burden on essential or socially beneficial items, and therefore not all supplies attract GST. Government retains the discretion, right? The central government is empowered based on GST Council recommendations, can issue notifications order to exempt any supply. This government has that discretion to decide upon. Exemptions promote social welfare, correct? How exemptions exist for healthcare, education, agriculture, all these are necessary, and charitable services, highlighting a policy focus on essential and welfare activity. And therefore, we can conclude that the exemption from promote what social welfare, because the services covered, healthcare, education, agriculture, and charitable services, are exempted. Dual nature of exemptions. Absolute exemptions are mandatory. We have seen that suppliers must not charge GST. Conditional exemptions are optional, available only if specified conditions are fulfilled. What impact on ITC? No ITC is available on inputs used for exempt supplies. Please keep in this mind. No ITC is available on inputs used for exempt supplies. Mixed supplies require apportionment or reversal of ITC under section 17. Okay, means you are providing, if you are providing only exempt supplies, then no ITC is available on inputs used for those exempt supplies. And if you are providing mixed supplies, then you have to require or apportion or reverse that part of the ITC under section 17. Taxpayer clarity is essential. Understanding classification and scope of exemption is critical to avoid wrongful tax collection or ITC claims. Why the necessity of these exemptions notifications or way, that is to clarify, clarity should be required to taxpayer to understand the classification and scope of exemption to avoid wrongful tax collection or ITC claims. Regular updates and notifications. Exemptions are dynamic in nature. We have learned that they are not static. One can amend anytime and subject to frequent changes, requiring constant monitoring by businesses. Means therefore we need to be updated through articles or through videos. We need to check upon if there are any changes made. Improves affordability. Exemptions lower cost of essential goods and services for the general public, especially low income groups. Means these exemptions for giving for the necessary items, necessary services used in necessary services, then the cost will be reduced. That particular cost of the particular product or services get reduced, and therefore the economy get benefited. Particularly low income groups will be benefited. May distort input credit change. Excessive exemptions can break the ITC flow also. This is one can say the cons of that. Excessive exemption can break the ITC flow, leading to cascading tax effects and pricing inefficiency. Means whenever if you see we life insurance or in insurance sector, GST is charged to customers, individual customers. Those are not registered persons. In that case, the burden on the insured. So chain will break at theirs. Okay. And we got 100 rupees insurance at 118. And that rupees 18 is for the non-registered person, non-registered individual customer. That rupees 18 will be the expense cost only. It cannot be benefited from it. And that is why that we distort the input credit change. Means excessive exemptions can break the IT's flow, leading to cascading tax effects and pricing inefficiency. Okay. Supplier must maintain documentation. Very important. Supplier must maintain documentation. Proper compliance and record keeping are needed to prove what eligibility for exemption during assessment or audits. Means most of the cases in assessments or audits, they look your ITC, whether the ITC you have availed is proper documentations and also supported by proper documentation, tax invoice on all that. If you are not maintaining that or wherever you deficient in that, then the assessment will be against you. Means that assessment will go against you. So to avoid any litigation, keep all the documents on record, keep everything proper, and then you can record or go ahead for exemption. So this is all we have covered under exemption notice exemptions from GST section 11 of CGST Act. We have covered. We have covered topics: general exemption, special order in exceptional cases. Power to issue exemption lies with the central government with the recommendations of the GST Council. Then we have seen absolute versus conditional exemption, goods exempted from GST, services exempted from GST. Also, we see exemptions by threshold limit instead of threshold of turnover. Other exempted activities we have seen, and then we move on where conclusions we have drawn from the today's learning. Hope this video series are helpful to you, and we are going to touch upon definitely whole GST Act, GST law. We are going to cover in this GST Relearn series. Okay, we are already covered now 4 topics. That is important definitions under GST, supply under GST, charge of GST, place of supply of GST, and today we have covered exemptions under GST. So please keep track on Tax Guru YouTube channel. If you are not yet subscribed, then please subscribe for latest updates also. And we are regularly meeting week by week. I have already started 3 video series. One, this is a GST Relearn series. In that complete GST law we are going to cover, and in though and other two video series on what law says, income tax based case laws and GST based case laws. So go and look it if you are litigation, if you are dealing in litigation practice. Also, if you are in a profession where your client faces some of the issues, so that case laws would be relevant for you. So be in touch with the Tax Guru YouTube channel and also with me. Thank you so much for patient learning, patient hearing. Okay, so let's meet in next video. See you soon.